let's start off with a trigger warning, because the following Bible verse is beyond detestable. I don't think our audience needs further evidence that the Bible is disgusting, but just in case, allow me to read Deuteronomy 22, 28-29. If a man is caught in the act of raping a young woman who is not engaged, he must pay 50 pieces of silver to her father. Then he must marry the young woman because he violated her, and he will never be allowed to divorce her. Whether or not the victim gets to determine whether or not she wants to go through with the marriage to her attackers isn't clear. This should not be a negotiation between her attacker and her father. Forcing the attacker to marry his victim is not bringing justice to the attacker, and forcing him to pay her father further objectifies the woman. I support victims. I condemn this book that many call the Word of God. Victims, you deserve better. Audience, we are all better than this. This is Talk Heathen. Call us because the show is starting now. Hello, welcome to Talk Heathen. Today's Sunday, October the 15th, 2023. I'm your host, Richard Gilliver, and today, my guest joining me, I am very, very excited, is Jim Burrows. Jim, how are you going?
I am doing pretty damn good. I had a lot of fun yesterday and still coming down from all that excitement and fun, so that's a good thing. How you doing there, Richard?
I'm very, very good. I wasn't supposed to be hosting tonight, so I've kind of been thrown in, but that's all cool. It means I get to work with you, Jim, which is something I've wanted to do for a long, long time, and I'm genuinely very excited about it.
Well, I think we talked about it at the back cruise, didn't we?
I wasn't at the back cruise, Jim. I'm in Britain.
But I thought we had talked about it at some point, and so my memory is very confused.
Yes, we have done, and it's happened, and I'm very excited that it has happened. So let's get some announcements out of the way. Talk Heathen is a product of the Atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 non-profit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. And as always, we have a question of the week. And before we get started, we want to give you last week's results of Talk Heathen to Me. So last week, we asked you, wrong answers only, why did God really flood the earth? Number 3 was X million. Reasons for the flood? God. Do you not understand how time-consuming and labor-intensive it would be if I had to go around smiting everyone individually? Jim, what do you think of that? It's a good point.
Yeah, that is kind of a good point. Yeah, I mean, why smack everybody individually and just the ones that need to be smacked? And we'll just smack everybody and punish everybody, right?
Just get everyone down at once, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's the right way to do things. Good, bad, in between, it doesn't matter. Just get them all, right?
Get them all. Number 2 is Chuck Gados, who says, reason for the flood? Probably a typo on some order from since the Martians are wondering why their canals are still empty.
That would explain it, yeah.
That would explain it. Can just imagine God sitting there, can't you? Saying, God damn it, I've done it again. I've got the wrong one. I'm supposed to be filling those canals up, and I've gone and put too much water on Earth. Silly me. Number 1 is Hale Lust, who says the real reason God flooded the Earth was the insurance money. Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh, yeah. You know, I would have said from drinking a ungodly amount of Coca-Cola. But, you know.
I love that. The prompt for next week is name something God didn't do, but took credit for. Enter your best answer below the video in the comments, and next week we will reveal the top 3 answers. But let me ask you, Jim, first. Name something God didn't do, but took credit for.
Knock up Mary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Young kids have been having sex before marriage since they were young kids. I would not expect anything else in that time period. So, yeah.
Yeah, but it was still attributed to Joseph's lineage, regardless, just to make the story fit.
Yeah.
I love that answer. I'm anxious to see what our audience comes up with in the comment section. Give us your best answer and tune in. The next week, we will reveal our top 3. But without further ado, let's go to the crew cam, the people who make it all happen, the wonderful, the mighty, the fantastic crew. Look at them all there. And crew rabbits, crew cats, crew people, crew everything. Because I even saw a little crew dog sneaking in there. And just into the clip before we went, it's a crew arc. I love it. Let's Jim, let's get into calls.
All right. Well, we'll take so folks, we have one atheist caller, one question mark. We do prioritize theists. So if you show up, even though you're dead last, if you're the only theist, we'll take you first. But taking these in order, let's go ahead and talk to RAO or RAO in Wyoming. As soon as I hit the talk button, there we go. Helps to hit the buttons, right?
Hey RAO, it's RAO. I think we're friends on Facebook, but you said something in the announcements that just brought up one of the questions. Is it possible for God to drink an ungodly amount of Coca-Cola? I think we're getting into that burrito paradox, but
I have no idea. I don't know what an ungodly amount of Coca-Cola would be. I only say that because I'm currently drinking Coca-Cola, and on occasion I have had to have the camera focus on the other person because I had to run to the bathroom, and I suspect that all the hosts have done that at some point. So that was on my mind at the moment. So I have no idea what an ungodly amount of Coca-Cola is. But when you got to piss like a racehorse, you got to piss like a racehorse. So
trust me, I know. And I was like, while I was in hold, I thought about me calling over the years, and I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes expressing some gratitude because you guys have made me a smarter, kinder, wiser person through being wrong and getting better at how I understand and know things.
You're most welcome. I am kind of curious how that ties into your saying that inner monologues may relate to simulation hypothesis.
Yeah, that was my top. Because I'm in a simulation hypothesis group, and I was talking about how we could differentiate players from NPCs, and somebody brought up inner monologues, and that was just a really interesting thought experiment for me, and I wanted to run it by smarter people to see if there's any ground to it.
Well, I think my first problem with it is that if we're living in a simulation, everything is simulated. So there is no difference between an NPC and a PC, or there would be none. Having written very weird simulations in the past, including things like the Game of Life, we had to write a Dragon World simulation. Very, very primitive, but still kind of funny. There wasn't really any difference between PCs and NPCs. They were all just characters doing things according to the rules you set up. So I guess the first thing would be explain what the necessity of having an NPC would be and what that role would be played by. I mean, why would you even need it if you're doing a simulation? And the second problem is, of course, just simulation hypothesis all up by itself needs a ton of evidence to even begin to talk about what's possible and what's not possible inside of it. So I think those are my two things.
Right, and they're I don't think I've talked to you about it, but we've got with the lectures by Dr. Gates. We have the quantum eraser. At this point, we don't have enough evidence to say that it's a theory, but I feel like we still have a strong hypothesis with it with the evidence we have at hand.
Yeah, I don't know of what evidence do we have at hand.
Well, the Planck constants for one.
Why would that be evidence of anything other than the Planck constant exists?
The Planck it's analogous to the frame rates in pixels that we see in every simulation. We have a Planck time that's the smallest measurable unit of time, which would be equal to a frame rate. And we've got a Planck length, which is the smallest measurable unit of space, and that would be equivalent to a pixel.
Yeah, now you're starting to sound like an intelligent design advocate, which is basically, when you get right down to it, that's all simulation hypothesis is, right? It's just another intelligent design hypothesis. It's not one that a creationist or a theist would agree with, but that's really all it is. And so in order to say, just because two things are analogous doesn't make them actually the same thing. And we have this thing called pareidolia for a reason, right? Where we recognize,
right? We tend to see where there ain't patterns because we need to see a tiger in the trees, right, so we can get the hell away from it.
Well, our brain is a pattern recognition machine. That's what a neural network does and does best, right? Is recognize patterns. So we're wired that way from the get-go to see patterns. So how do you know that's just not a pattern we're seeing that doesn't actually exist? And also, how do you know that
I don't.
Yeah. So I don't see how that's evidence for the claim. Right, I don't see how that's evidence for a claim. They're facts, they're things that exist, but I don't see how that's evidence. Right, that could be evidence for anything. We can't say what it's evidence of, other than it exists. And to try and draw conclusions off that kind of thing, I think is entirely wrong. But how would you go about disproving simulation hypothesis?
Looking at the Plancks. I think that if we have rigid tetrahedron Plancks, we're in a simulation. If we have more roundish Plancks, then our universe is organic.
Why?
Why? Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Because I think the rigid shapes would be more analogous with pixels than something that was like fluid and like how electrons interact with each other.
Again, RAO, you're making a false equivalence to pixels. This thing about pixels, you're not demonstrating that anything to do with Planck length, Planck time is actually analogous to pixels. As Jim says, you're just kind of. It's kind of this pareidolia which is coming across. It appears to be that way to you. We have things that aren't round. In nature, we have snowflakes and we have honeycombs and things like that. So we do have things which aren't round in nature. This doesn't prove that we're in a simulation, and I think it's very tenuous that you're kind of going there, that it is kind of, even any kind of evidence, even evidence which raises the probability, which is kind of, for me, a weaker form of evidence. It's not even that. It's just kind of you looking at one thing and looking at another and drawing an equivalence between them, which there is no evidence there for.
All right. And pixels are really an artifact of our display technology. There is no reason for them to exist other than the way that we have created our display technologies. Our eyes don't deal in pixels, for instance. There's no pixelation when we're using our eyes. So it's only when we digitize something that we actually get pixels. The rest of the world really doesn't exist in pixels. So you're comparing it to something that we created to say that it is created, and that doesn't seem quite right. We need to compare the universe to something else in order to determine if this is, created or not, whether that creation is, through a simulation, some sort of simulation technology, or created by a god. Either way, you need to first take the entire universe and compare it to another entire universe. But to compare the universe to parts that are inside of it don't make any sense. It's really kind of serious.
Yeah, right now we have a sample size of 1. And that kind of sucks for a sample size. And
it's less than 1, right? It's less than one because we haven't seen the entire universe yet.
Good point. Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out, Jim. Like, yeah, we don't even have a full perspective of the universe, so our sample size is bullshit right now. And right. I think that we need both sides to like continue investigating, looking into it, to just like figure out what is the right answer. If I'm wrong, dude, I will tell y'all flat out that I figured out that I'm wrong. But right now we just don't have enough evidence to say one way or the other. And I know that gets into that.
I disagree with that. I was going to ask you, RAO, what your position is, whether you was kind of coming at this from a thought experiment kind of way, or whether it was something you genuinely believed in. I think you've kind of just answered that for me. But I don't think it is, and theists sometimes go down this route as well of saying, well, we've got these two worldviews which are equally as likely. And it's not the case. It is simply not the case that they are equally as likely and the same as this. The simulation hypothesis is something which is not widely accepted. I forgot, was it Nick Bostrom?
Well,
I can't remember.
If we're going to talk about probability, we know of more universes that are simulated than we know of universes that aren't simulated.
So
no, we don't. We don't know of any universes that are simulated. No, we don't. That's not a universe.
No, yeah. If you're going to say World of Warcraft is a simulated universe, you don't know what a simulation is. No. There's no World of Warcraft is not a simulation. Now, I have simulated a mining universe. That dragon simulation that I created was kind of a universe, but it was so simplistic as to be laughable to compare it to. We don't have. We
also have examples like No Man's Sky. Like I was thinking about games.
You can't compare. Yeah, I wouldn't use. There is no game that I would use as to claim that it's a simulated universe. There's just so for one, the universe is just too complex for that. Two, the universe is analog, not digital. And so that creates a problem. That creates a huge problem. I mean, we can go back to the 1970s.
PS4 has analog sticks.
Pardon?
My PS4 has analog sticks, and we're just stupid humans.
It's not stick. Well, I'm talking about the entire universe is analog, not your joysticks. Jeez. I mean, the entire universe. And let me give you an example of what that really means, right? So back in the 70s, before chaos theory became a part of science, a weather guy forecaster was running, keeping track of all these different numbers.
Like when they saved the information, they could only save 3 digits, but when they were running the program, they ran 6 digits, and then they ran the 2 graphs, and after like a month, the weather patterns were,
Right, and that's a problem. That's an analog world because 6 digits is still not accurate enough to keep track of the weather and to actually run a simulation of the weather. In fact, we don't have a computer capable at the moment of simulating significant portions of the atmosphere, just because it's too complex, but also because the only thing we have is digital and the world is analog. It's not digital. So to claim any game as being a simulation equivalent to the universe is just absolutely ludicrous. I think there is no comparison. If you want to do a real simulation, you need a computer powerful enough to handle the analog world. So,
yeah, I can.
You've given me a lot to think about.
RAO. I want to try and put it in kind of terms that might kind of make it like blatantly obvious what we're trying to say to you here. If you take a state-of-the-art, multi-billion-dollar warplane and then take a toy Barbie car and say that they are the same thing because they are both vehicles. This is what me and Jim are trying to present to you. They are in no way, shape, or form the same thing. You just simply cannot compare modern computer games with the universe and say, well, we already have a simulated universe, because we don't. That's not what we have at all.
Well, when you're taking that little Power Wheels Barbie car, you can still learn braking, turning, the basic fundamentals of driving, and you can apply that when you get older and you get to that Murcielago.
Not really.
Well, you have to learn stick shift, and that's a whole. That's a whole.
No, you've got some other things to learn. Yes, the other problem you have is if you're going from a Power Wheels car to a real car, everything changes, because you scaled up in size, which means you scaled up in weight, you scaled up in power. Yeah, they sort of kind of work the same, but they don't really for manipulating things. But I don't see how this is even remotely close to saying that games, no matter how massively multiplayer, are the same as an entire universe. That just, I mean, these two things are completely different things. You're comparing things inside the universe to the entire universe. And what you really need to be comparing is universe to universe. You need to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples. And you're not doing that at all. You're comparing, right, first of all, you're comparing things that man made. Go ahead.
We need to get Michio Kaku back to work and see if he can find one for us.
Yeah, that's not even, I mean, we first have to prove that something can't exist outside of our universe, and that something can exist without time or space, which is probably a pretty good trick in and of itself. But you're just, I mean, it seems just so wild to me to take, oh, look, this is what us humans are doing. Therefore, some being powerful enough to create a analog universe like this one is thinking the same way we do. I just don't see that happening. I mean, we can look at the differences in the way humans and other creatures, fairly intelligent ones, dolphins, some monkeys, possibly squid and octopus, and look at how they do things. Their ability to manipulate. Pardon?
Octopus scare the hell out of me.
Yeah, they're fairly intelligent.
Those things are way too smart for their own good, or definitely too smart for our good.
Yeah, well, there's a really cool YouTube channel where they do things and put octopus to the test, so to speak, and they give them puzzles to figure out. And you can definitely tell when they're thinking about something.
From the inside?
Pardon?
Like unscrewing jars from the inside?
Well, that's just a matter of getting enough grip on the top of the jar to unscrew it. I mean, just because we can't do it.
Yeah, and figuring out what counterclockwise is. Like, well, immediately figuring out this is the way to loosen the jar.
Yeah, but I mean, again, that doesn't take a whole heck of a lot of intelligence, but it does take some. But they're very, very smart, and you can tell when they're thinking about stuff. And there's some really cool YouTube channels where they make them do exactly that. But they don't think about things the same way we do, because they don't manipulate the world the same way we do. They don't live in the same world that we do. They live in an underwater world and deal with things very differently. So to expect some sort of unknown alien being to think about the world, to think about things the way we do, I think is just ridiculous. To expect the technology to be digital, I'm not entirely convinced that we could even assume that. The reason we do digital is because it's easier to say that between, pardon?
We do digital because it's easier.
Yeah, it's easier, but analog is better. It's just harder to do analog. So again, there's a whole bunch of things here that you're assuming when you say that simulation hypothesis is something you can consider. And these are all things that we don't know. So I could say anything about a simulation hypothesis and be just as right as somebody who says something completely different from what I say that his simulation hypothesis, because neither one of us have any way to test anything. Nobody has any way to falsify anything. And remember, that's what you need. You need to falsify it. If you can't falsify it, it's pseudoscience. And that's basically what I think simulation theory is.
That's what I'm looking for. That's what I've been looking for. How do I prove myself wrong? And
if you can't figure it out, it's pseudoscience.
Trying to do.
Right. And if you can't figure out a way to
exactly
falsify
why
it,
I want to break it away.
right. So what does it mean when if you can't figure out a way to falsify something?
Put it on the shelf until you can.
No, I mean, it means you're dealing with pseudoscience. See, so there's a difference between figuring out a way to falsify it and being able to falsify it. Those are two different things. If you can't figure out a way to falsify it, it's pseudoscience. Doesn't matter if you can or can't.
Well,
and right now, nobody
I'm
can.
not
There is no way to.
I'm not extremely intelligent, and I'm pretty sure the live chat's going to verify that right about now. So, like, I just have ideas on how I might be able to figure something out, and I'm looking to people smarter than me to actually see if I have anything here. So, I mean, I love talking to you. I love disagreeing with you, so I can, like, get more ground one way or the other, but I am trying to prove myself wrong. Trust me.
RAO, it's not about being smarter than someone else. It's about the way you're assessing claims. That's nothing to do with intelligence whatsoever. You know, we can assess claims. You can learn how to assess claims in a way that like makes them reasonable to hold. And it seems to me if you believe simulation to be true, and you seem also at the same time to be saying, well, actually, I've no way of demonstrating it's true. So why do you believe it to be true if you can't demonstrate it to be true? Is it just a nice idea? Because that's what heaven is to a lot of people. Do you think believing in God and believing in heaven's a reasonable position to hold? And if you don't, then ask yourself, well, why am I holding on to this when it's got the same amount of merit as that, just because it appeals to me as an idea?
Well, because I can disprove the Bible. The sun didn't exist until day 4, according to Genesis. So if the sun didn't exist until day 4, days 1 through 3 could not possibly happen. So, like, I can just disregard the Bible in chapter 1.
Why can you? What happens if, I mean, this is going off topic a bit, but what happens if the Bible's allegory and not meant to be like a word-for-word representation of what really happened? You kind of, it seems like I've rejected
story, so I'm still right. So
say that again. I missed that.
Like if it's just an allegory, then it's just a made up thing that somebody said, which makes the Bible a work of fiction. So
that is pretty much what we've got with simulation theory at the moment, and yet you're clinging on to that as though it is true.
Yeah. What Richard's kind of asking is, what's the difference between you and an intelligent design proponent?
Intelligent design is trying to sell itself with, you know what? There isn't a whole lot of difference.
There isn't, RAO, no. Because intelligent design is trying to legitimize itself by claiming it's a serious scientific theory. And simulation theory is trying to legitimize itself by claiming it's a legitimate scientific theory. And they both have exactly the same level of merit to them being true. And that is none, because none of them have any evidence to demonstrate that they are in fact true, or even possible to be true.
Did the entire world just hear my brain break?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. I did want to touch on that when you do the intro, that Deuteronomy thing, Deuteronomy 22, I calculated the math, and that amount of silver is less than $400.
Okay.
50 shekels of silver is less than $400.
Yeah.
And that's in today's
Well, the fact that you think, the fact that the Bible thinks money, I think the fact that the Bible thinks money will solve the problems is the horrible part. Yeah.
And just like, I calculated the math for fun because, you know, I kind of like, I kind of like showing Christians what their Bible says. But, yeah, I just wanted to touch on that before I let y'all go. Thank you so much for talking to me today, and
you're welcome.
I hope I got a better spot next time.
All right. Good luck.
Thanks, RAO.
Much love, y'all.
Thanks, RAO. All right, bye.
That was great. I love that. The RAO's been calling for a couple of years now, I think, and on and off on various different subjects. And one thing you've got to say about him is he is willing to kind of admit when he's, the light has come on. And I really,
Absolutely.
really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, that's always nice. So.
Okay, so we have a brand new, exciting way to support the ACA. You can buy an engraved brick and become part of the library's legacy. Check out this video.
Have you ever wanted to make a permanent impact on the atheist community of Austin? Help support our space for free thought by buying a custom engraved brick to be laid on the building grounds to help raise funds for improvements. Our building has stood as a beacon for years, bringing people together. But 3 years of emptiness due to the pandemic have taken a toll, leaving it in disrepair. Help us restore this hub of connection and support by buying a brick. Moses had his stone tablets, but we're doing our own version. Join our brick fundraiser and let your engraved messages stand the test of time, minus commandments. Visit tiny.cc/ACA bricks for more information.
We have a new limited edition t-shirt. To get that and all the other ACA merchandise, visit tiny.cc/merchaca to get them now. And I love this month's t-shirt. It's great. And also, we have flyers you can go and support the show with by sticking them up. They're available at tiny.cc/ACA flyers. The printable calling flyers, and you can post these with permission, please, because we don't want anyone getting into trouble, to community bulletin boards so people know they should call our show and defend their faith. If you do post them, I must stress, make sure you've got permission and make sure you snap a picture of it in place and send it to tv@atheist-community.org, and we may feature your photo on an upcoming show. And if you happen to be in the Austin area on October the 29th, 2023, then please join us for the live broadcast of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. Talk Heathen will be hosted by Christy Powell and Johnny P. Angel. The Atheist Experience will be hosted by Johnny P. Angel and Sophia Spiner. Doors open at noon, and we hope to see you there. You can become part of the Talk Heathen community at our fan-run Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. And you can follow Talk Heathen on TikTok. Talk Heathen is now available, and you can join the pre-show lives at the ACA TikTok. The Atheist Community of Austin has got you covered. We have got so many great things, so many great ways to interact with this community. Jim, one of them is super chats, and we have one from Toasted Marshmallow Adventures, who sent one for $9.99, and he says, Jim Burrows is my favorite host. It's mine too. Toasted Marshmallow, I've got to say. And besides Forrest, just giving you shit at the cost of $9.99, money well spent. I still have 89 paid for characters to use. Damn, how the hell are both of you? That was a mouthful.
He used every character he had. He paid for it, so
he paid for it, so he's going to use it. Why not? I've got something to say actually. Before we go, we have got calls. Before we go on to the next call, last week, myself and Secular Rarity were hosting, and we had to drop like 7 calls at the end of the show.
Oh, wow.
If you want to call in the show, call in early. Make sure you get in early, and then you get your opportunity to have a conversation. We rushed the last couple of calls, and I really didn't want to do that. I really didn't want to drop anyone, but we were simply ran out of time. We went half an hour over, and we still ran out of time. Make sure you get those calls in early if you're going to call, to make sure you get your opportunity to speak with us. Jim, let's take another call.
Well, I was going to say on the super chat thing, we will read the super chat and we will say pretty much anything you put on there. There's probably some moral and ethical things we won't say, but if you want to hear us, admit that we believe in God, cough up a super chat. We'll say that. We may not mean everything we say, but we will say it. We will read it. So you can have some fun with that on our behalf, or at our expense. So, all right. So yeah, let's We do have a theist on the line. Yay. It is David in Louisiana who wants to talk about the Caanites and God's wrath. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I know this is a common, atheist Christian apologetic talking point, the Caanites and or God's wrath. But I think the Caanites is like a really good example of God's wrath. And I feel like this talking point is really misrepresented by the atheist side.
Why?
Okay.
First of all, a lot of atheists, I don't think they read the passage in full, and if they did, they didn't understand the context of the situation. They're just kind of upset that the Bible called for I guess you could call it a genocide or whatever, but it's really God's wrath because the Caanites, a lot of people don't know that group of people, they would sacrifice their children and they would play the drums so loud.
What's your evidence for that claim?
Hear the children burning.
What's your evidence for that claim?
Well, it's not in the Bible, but I mean, the descendants are.
It's not in the Bible, and it's not generally accepted history. It's also not generally accepted history as well. So again, what is your evidence for your claim?
It's grounded in historical fact.
Is it?
Well, that these people sacrifice their children. I mean,
people all over the world have sacrificed children for all kinds of things. But to say that the Caanites were doing it at that time, that's a very specific claim. Can you justify the claim?
Well, I don't have sources offhand, but I mean, it's just common knowledge that group of people in that area, not just the Caanites, but the Philistines as well. Basically, all the enemies of God.
In fact, the historians that I have read all disagree with that. That was not something that was in common Canaanite practice at the time. So that's not the issue. And also, you've got another problem in that if God is all powerful, he didn't have to have the Israelites attempt to commit and fail, because they failed to commit genocide against the Caanites because they were still around. He tried several times. So you got to pick which one you're looking at. But if he is all powerful, then he had another way to do it. He had another way to stop that from happening, and he chose not to do it that way. He chose the worst way to do it, which is war and genocide. He didn't have to. Because he's omnipotent, right? He's got other choices that we don't have as humans because we're not omnipotent, and he is. The second problem that you have is that the Israelites are, in fact, Caanites. We can trace, through archaeology, we can trace their history back to Canaan. They were, in fact, Canaanites. So they were just a small group or small rural group in the hills. So you've got all these problems with what you're talking about in terms of Canaanites. And it sounds to me like you're the one who doesn't actually understand the passage and the contextual history of the passage outside of what's in the Bible.
That's incorrect. I understand that Abraham, the first Jew, was from the land of Canaan. Now, that doesn't make him a Canaanite, because only way after Abraham, the first Jew.
The archaeological evidence disagrees with you.
But this is where the woke anti-Semitism comes in, because
I'm not being anti-Semite at all by pointing out that the Israelites are Canaanites.
You are.
Because there's nothing.
Is the
oh God,
you're
so ridiculous.
David. I'm going to get off this kind of silly anti-Semitism run that you're on at the moment, because you said something earlier that kind of really, it kind of piqued my ears, and it was just a split-second thing. But you said all of the people who God was kind of put his vengeance on were sacrificing babies. Do you think that's true of the Midianites?
Listen, no, it's not true of all of God's enemies, but my point is that God makes them as his enemies in the Old Testament for a reason, and the Old Testament was fit specifically for those Bronze Age people, a time of rape and pillaging and such, the Israelites were actually the most moral group of people that you can find.
Yeah, again, you need to go study history, because most of the Israelite laws were no different than the laws of those surrounding people with regard to slaves and where you could take them, to enslaving their own people. All those laws are fairly common throughout all of that. So to say that they're more moral is just not to understand the true contextual history of the Middle East at that time. It's just your ignorance on the topic is astounding, and you should also take a history of that area from a secular source and actually find out what was going on at the time. You'll see just how ridiculous you're being.
Or even a religious source, which is an actual scholar rather than just some crazy person who's...
Well, yeah, a scholar who hasn't signed a statement of faith. A scholar who hasn't signed a statement of faith, yeah. Because if they sign the statement of faith, then they will not look at the fact that the Israelites started off as Caanites and were Caanites, that the God you worship is actually a minor god in that pantheon. You'll ignore all of that. You'll ignore the references to multiple gods in the Old Testament even. So all of this stuff is stuff that you're going to ignore simply because you started from a conclusion and worked your way backwards. And if you start with all the facts, not just the ones in the Bible, but the ones outside the Bible, and you look at the Canaanite pantheon and you look at who all the gods were, and you look at what other myths were saying about those gods, then you'd realize where exactly the monotheism came out of, the polytheistic Caanites. And those are just simple facts. So you can look at all that, and I would suggest that you really go and do that.
I always think relook at your secular history, because it's proven in schools and colleges, which was started by the church, as well as science started by the church. It's all been
that has nothing to do with what I just said.
What has been proven in schools
You're
and
a complete
colleges,
non sequitur. That's a complete non sequitur. It has nothing to do with what I just said.
What
the
has been
history
proven,
of the time
David?
does not support the Bible conclusions. The history of the time is of Israelites coming from Caanites, of Israelites being polytheistic at one time and then turned into a monotheistic religion. Those are the facts. It has nothing to do with what you just said.
Actually, this whole idea of that the Israelites had a pantheon of gods has been debunked plenty of times. And this idea,
it hasn't, David.
No, that's the problem.
David, it hasn't.
Yeah.
The consensus of scholars, including Christian believing scholars, know that this is the case. They know there was a pantheon of gods. There's many journal articles written on the subject. There's so much information out there which demonstrates this to be the case. No serious scholar dismisses this. And even those good scholars who don't accept it, and this is a mark of a good scholar, by the way, even those good scholars who don't accept it will openly admit that they are in the minority. They won't lie and say, well, most people believe this. They'll acknowledge that they are in the minority, and that is the mark of a good scholar, regardless of whether you agree with what they say or not. But the fact is that the majority of scholarship points to the fact that there were lots of deities, there are lots of different tribal groups, they shared a lot of the deities, and what you call the Christian God. There are many papers written on this very subject that state that he is either an amalgamation of Yahweh and El, or an amalgamation of Yahweh, El, and Baal. This is well known. It's well understood in scholarship. So you're just coming out with nonsense at this point, saying that that's not the case. It may be your belief, but it is not backed up by scholarship, and it is not the understood position in scholarship. You are simply wrong on this point.
To trust your secular education when it's shown time and time and again, it can't.
David, stop right there. David, stop. David, stop. My degree is in religion, philosophy, and ethics. In the religion portion of that degree, virtually Every professor I have was a religious believing person. I did not come from a secular background. I have professors who are religious. I have professors who believe that God exists. And guess what they teach? Do you think they teach that? Here's a question for you. Do you think that in colleges where they're teaching about these things, do you think that they teach that God sprung up on his own and was not amalgamated with other gods? Or do you think that they teach that God is an amalgamation of other God characters from other tribal groups? Which one of those things do you think are actually taught in colleges?
Anti-Semites and enemies of the West.
To what? Did you just say enemies of the West? Did you just say enemies of the West? That's what I thought I heard you say, but I may not have heard that.
I think
he hung up.
He's
he did hang up. I'm looking at Colin's video. Yeah, he hung up. Wow, what a call. Accusing us of being anti-Semitic when we're just stating. I mean, there's nothing anti-Semitic to say that the Israelites started off as Caanites. Nothing anti-Semitic about that.
Do you know what? I'm quite glad we got that call, Jim, because when I was advertising this show in the Facebook groups earlier on, I actually wrote, if you are a believing person and you think that you're on the fence, you're a believing person and you're on the fence, come and listen to the show, because you will hear arguments that will convince you that religious arguments aren't good. It's callers like the last caller which do our job for us, because the amount of comments we get saying, you just get these people from like the bottom of the barrel to call in and make religion look bad. No, these are the people who choose in to present their arguments. If you think you can do better, if you think you are an apologist who like a practicing apologist who thinks you can do better than that, give us a call, because we're not picking these people. They're calling us off their own back, and they're making religion look bad. I mean, there's no other way about it. They're making it look worse than it is, is
the problem. I think the real problem is that professional apologists don't do much better.
No, they don't.
I mean, they're better on the philosophical points. They're sharper on a lot of different areas, but their arguments don't vary that much. They're not that different from what our callers are doing. So our callers shouldn't feel bad that they're getting beat up on this program, because their apologist heroes, if they have any, would fare the same way because they got the same problems.
I want to point out as well the difference between RAO, who called earlier, and said it kind of recognized that it was stuck in a bit of a rut and that his position may be wrong. And that last caller who kind of rage quit because it was just, I asked him a simple question, which was so blatantly obvious that the answer he was going to give was wrong.
Yeah.
It's painful. It really, really is.
Yeah. All right. We've got another. Do we have announcements or something to read?
We have a super chat. We have Tau Software who sends $5 and says, just showing my support. I love Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. Thank you very much for your support. And you can find Jim on both shows.
Yes. And Kelly typed in chat here that to our where's the evidence in the Bible, or he said there was evidence in the Bible of the Caanites sacrificing their children. Apparently, there's Jeremiah 19:5. So he didn't even know his Bible all that well. And I may have said something to the effect that I didn't think it was in the Bible either. And if I seemed that positive, I was not. And until Kelly showed this, I'm now positive that there is something in the Bible. But anyway, just wanted to correct myself in case I was wrong. So let's go to the next caller. This is calling himself Universal in Arizona. Jesus Christ is a good moral compass. Okay. So it's okay to get angry and start throwing tables over at a temple because you're pissed off? That's good morals?
In that particular case, I would say that's on a whole nother level, in which that is a story that's saying this is how you're supposed to guard your heart. Anytime you're in a position where you can do something that's destructive or positive, you guard your heart from doing what is negative, because negative is
but
destructive.
Jesus didn't do that. Jesus didn't do that, did he?
Right.
He went and tore shit up and got all
Now,
kinds of pissed off about it, right? So why is it the moral lesson there that if you offend God, that you are justified in being angry and tearing people's shit up?
And you know what? In that particular case, he was out of pocket. But as far as
so he wasn't perfect.
As far as no, I don't think he was perfect. I think he was in perfecting moments. He was perfecting his perfection, just like we're supposed to be doing.
Okay.
So
and what is Jesus' stance on slavery? What's his stance on slavery? What did he ever say about slavery?
What did he say about slavery?
I'm asking that question.
I'm not sure what he said about slavery. I know he said he came to set us free. See?
From what?
Now, when I say free from all kind of ailments that go on when you're not walking in the right standing. That's free.
Like what?
Free from the animal state.
Like what?
Not being able to discipline yourself, not being able to have self-control, not being able to recognize what is productive, not being able to create harmony for yourself.
Universal. Do you think you need to be a follower of Jesus to be able to do those things?
No, a follower of truth. See,
but
these are true ways in which if you follow, then you shine. You grow.
Jesus wasn't the first one to say any of this.
Life.
Jesus wasn't the first one to say any of that. He wasn't the first one to say any of that. And I would contend that he said it the worst. I think the Stoics did a much better job. Most of the Greek philosophers did a much better job of pointing this out, of trying to define what a good life was. And I don't know much about Indian philosophy or Chinese, but I would suspect they said it better as well. I think he was the worst person to say any of those things. Okay, so what did he say that was new that would be, pardon?
This is exactly what I'm talking about. This philosophy that Jesus was under, it's been around for ages and ages. And all the sage and wise people, they followed it because they're universal laws and Christ-likeness. See, the Buddha was like
but that doesn't prove that. But do you think that Jesus Christ was the Son of God and a supernatural being?
I think we all are. And can you prove you're not? Beings? Can you prove you're not? Do you have a
That's not how it works. Universal, that's not how it works, right? You make a claim, you provide the evidence. And saying, well, can you prove you're not, is not evidence, right? That's BS, quite frankly. So you claim we're all supernatural beings, so can you prove your claim?
Yes, sir. Okay, so now a supernatural being is something that operates on a level beyond our comprehension. Our body.
What does that mean? No. You got to back up. Because universally, I'm sorry. You got to back up because you said something I don't know what you mean. I mean, I heard the words, I understand what the words mean, but it made no sense. What does a level beyond our comprehension mean? What does that mean?
Consciousness. You have a consciousness. You have emotions. You cannot interpret it.
We all know we know how all that works. That's all natural. That's all natural phenomena from how our bodies work. We know that there's nothing supernatural about it.
Okay, but
I mean, we actually have devices right now that can, in very simple ways, pretty much read minds. Right? They can detect simple words as we're thinking about them. And we can do that. There's nothing supernatural involved.
You're talking about AI algorithm, which
No,
is totally
no. I'm talking about being able to put a sensor on your head and using that to detect thought inside a human brain. Simple ones so far. But there's no reason to believe that we can't get more complex ones. But yeah, that's what we're talking about. Being able to sense it.
So do you agree that we have a conscience?
Or do I agree that we're conscious? Yes, we are conscious. Do we have a conscience?
Okay, so
yeah, we have. Right, but again, I can explain our conscience, our sense of right or wrong, with purely natural means by pointing out that cooperation is a survival strategy, and that species that cooperate do better at surviving than species that don't. And we can tell that in all the species that are social and how widespread they are. Everything from meerkats to rats, to monkeys, horses, wolves, any number of creatures out there do better when they're acting together, because you spread out your ability to get resources, all kinds of reasons. Basically, cooperation is a survival strategy. And if you're going to cooperate, there are certain things that have to happen. You have to have trust, is one of those things. So all our sense of morality is nothing more than evolutionary lessons in how to cooperate so that we as a human species survive. Again,
so now, do you believe that there's a law called the law of individuality? And this is a universal law, and this means that everything that's here in this universe has a specific purpose. And as a human man, you know what?
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
So do you believe?
Not the case.
And the reason why I don't believe that is, as you said, has a particular purpose. Purpose is determined by a mind. Purpose is determined by us. When we as human beings say that a tree has a purpose of creating oxygen, that's us assigning a purpose to the tree. That is completely ignoring the fact that trees also take in CO2, that they take in nutrients from their roots, that they stabilize the earth. There's a whole lot of other things that trees do, but that doesn't mean that's their purpose. It's just what they do. We're saying that their purpose is to do that.
Point.
Nobody else is. Again, no supernatural needed.
Think about this, sir. Do eyes have a purpose? Do lungs have a purpose?
I have no idea if you have a purpose.
Do your emotions have a purpose?
Pardon?
You say, do your eyes have a purpose?
Do my eyes have a purpose? No. They just do what they do.
Sir. They're designed to see, sir. Your ears are designed to hear.
So you have to prove that they were designed. And given how bad eyes are and how badly they work, if they were designed, the designer needs to have their license revoked and told and never allowed to design anything again. And I say that as someone who wears glasses.
You are literally talking to two people who are quad eyes, sir. You're talking to two people who wear corrective lenses. Universal.
No.
Let's get back to what you called in about, because you seem to have gone on a really strange tangent, telling two people who wear corrective lenses that their eyes were designed for a purpose and by an allegedly perfect designer. Universal, your call, if I may refresh your memory, was about Jesus Christ being a good moral compass. What is it that convinces you, because you've asked us a lot of questions and not really actually presented any evidence for the argument you're making. What is it that convinces you that Jesus Christ is a good moral compass?
Okay, because of the simple fact that he said that Jesus, he followed so many other customs that followed this way. And this way is that the internal you is the God that's in you. Jesus was the man, the Christ is the spirit, the consciousness. So it's when you tap into your consciousness, then you can live like all these great people before Jesus, the Christ. It's like Buddha, the Christ. They follow a path in which this path brought them to a greater state of existence. It tamed their animal. So it gives the animal
universal. You've touched on a couple of things there. Let's not just go on a kind of a rambling rant again. You've touched on a couple of things there. First, I'm very interested in you saying about these God figure insiders, because that is that was an early one of the early kind of theologies which were chewed over while in the first couple of 100 years of Christianity. It is not the orthodox view. So I'm already getting that you don't follow the orthodox view of Christianity. Is there something about the orthodox view that you think you should be rejecting, and what is that and why?
Well, everybody in this time now can look up the history and see that as far as the Bible and some of the things in it, it's more so stories with morals. And a lot of the information has been collected from a whole lot of sources. But at the same time, the sources that they plagiarized or what have you, they had universal truths in it that if anybody follow these truths, then they'll benefit and then they'll be prosperous.
Universal. How are you distinguishing between what is a universal truth and what is just a story? What criteria are you using?
Universal truths, they're constant. It's like a universal truth is that everything vibrates. Everything has sound. Vibration. No. Everything has frequency.
No.
See? Everything has no. It's a cause and effect.
No, and both. So everything vibrates is not true, and cause and effect doesn't apply at the quantum level at all. The quantum level is all about probability, and there, in fact, there was a Nobel Prize given out recently for proving that phenomena has no cause, and that phenomena was spin in quantumly entangled particles. There is no reason for them to always have opposite spin. They just do. So cause and effect doesn't work at the quantum level, and everything bubbles up from the quantum level to what we see and experience at the non-quantum level. So that's wrong. I mean, and the whole vibration thing is really, really just ridiculous. It doesn't, none of that is true. You said everything has its own sound. Sound only exists when you have something to vibrate. So you need air or wood or some other medium for that to happen. And not everything does have sound. If nothing is vibrating, then nothing has sound. So all those things are just dead wrong. Right. Just dead wrong.
My point is this, is that, I mean, there are universal laws that are in play, regardless if you follow them or not. And there are science
universal. There are universal laws. None of the things you've said are any of them. No, you have not stated a single universal law. You have stated many things that you seem to be attracted to as an individual, but nothing that has been demonstrated as a universal law. You've got a positive outlook, don't get me wrong. Saying, that everybody has this like lovely kind of thing that's within them that can well up and bring about great things and great morality and stuff. But it's all a bit kind of, just fairy tale, if I'm honest with you. And there's nothing kind of in there which leads me to believe that you've like looked at any of this seriously, other than just being kind of enchanted by this nice idea.
See, because you just said it. It is the idea that counts. Do you know that your existence is only in the moment? And if you can conjure these kinds of energy, dwelling
Universal, let me stop you there, please. Universal, let me stop you there, because I've been seriously, and I mean seriously, studying Buddhism from scriptural point of view for at least 10 years. I've been practicing Buddhist meditation for well over 20 years. This kind of word salad that you're coming out with is not a representation of Buddhism. It's simply not. You just kind of, it's like, oh man, it feels good, man. That's wonderful. What a good vibration. Oh, let's give that love out to the world. And that's not a serious representation of what Buddhism is. It's not a serious representation of what Christianity is. You're just kind of finding these really weak linkages between these different religious ideas and stringing them together into this wonderful concoction. And I'm sure if I went to a restaurant and asked for a bowl of word salad, and it was your restaurant, I would get the greatest meal I have ever been presented with. But at the end of the day, that's all you're presenting us with. If I went and asked you, if I went and asked you to grow the food and give us the actual, the ways that the food grows, the ways that the food were put together, all the science behind it, I'd get nothing from you. You're presenting a great bowl of word salad, sir, and nothing else. And you really kind of need to go. And I don't say this to many callers, but you need to go and start again from the beginning, because you're not doing yourself or anybody you're talking to any favors by presenting this absolute nonsense, if I'm honest with you, to the world. It's really not helpful. Universal, are you still with us?
Yes, sir.
Sure. Okay.
Yes. I'm trying to see if you about to hang up or not. So now I'll just respond, and like you say, I think it's for the individual to gather from all resources and use his or her intelligence and gather what they can from whatever source that's going to bring forth them a stronger position in life, because motivation is very, very important.
But motivation has nothing to do with your good moral compass that you claim, Jesus. I mean, most of what you said has had nothing to do with being a good moral compass. And that's kind of my biggest problem is you've spewed a bunch of new age woo-woo that makes no sense. It only sounds good to the ear, but in practice, you have no idea what it really means. If I'm expecting someone to be a good moral compass, so the first thing I expect them to do is to find morals and what is good and what is bad. And the best thing that I've ever seen is that good is anything that contributes to the happiness of the entire human population, and bad is anything that detracts from that. So once we start from that purely subjective choice, there are a number of things that I would expect a good moral compass to actually point to. I would expect them to point to the fact that slavery is always wrong, no matter what it is and under no matter what conditions, slavery is always wrong. I would expect them to point out that being human is being human in all of its colors and shapes and sizes, orientations, and everything else, that love is love. Right? And we don't see any of that out of Jesus Christ. We don't see anything about how cooperation works and how to build communities. We don't see rules on how to do any of that. What we get are a bunch of rehashing of things that have happened in the philosophies from other areas. That makes sense because that entire area was very Hellenistic at the time that Jesus was supposed to be walking around. And so we expect to see a lot of good Hellenistic philosophy involved in that, and we don't see it. But we also see a lot of bad Hellenistic philosophy, like the Hellenistic philosophy on slavery. And we could also probably make the case that some Hellenistic philosophy was very misogynistic. And I would expect to see a good moral compass to point out misogyny where he sees it and to call that out and to say what is and isn't misogyny and give some very clear guidelines on that. He doesn't do that. There's a lot of things he doesn't do that if you were to say this person is a good moral compass, I'd have to go, no, he doesn't. The only thing that he does is, according to the stories, is carry on the Old Testament. And the Old Testament God is a misogynistic, narcissistic monster. And he doesn't deviate from any of that.
So now, this is something very, very important that needs to be noted. And the fact is that, see, when Jesus came on the planet, and even before him, there was a rule that says, love your brother like you love yourself. See, now, but first you will have to understand what loving yourself is. See, everybody.
Now you're going into more nonsense, and you're going into more woo, right? Because that has nothing to do with what I just said.
No, this is, if you just let me just a little bit more time with it. See, now, if you love yourself, like, if you love your brother like you love yourself, see, then you're not going to do nothing to anybody but good because you love yourself. But first you will have to get to know yourself, see? And yourself is of a source that is of pure power. See,
universal.
Universal is what we're trying
like I said,
to do.
Whoa, universal.
You said
Universal.
nothing could change my mind that everything you're about, when I said earlier that everything you're about to say was woo, you proved my point. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, when one of the hosts kind of interrupts you to clarify a point, please don't say no to them, because it's not your show, it's our show. And, that's the quickest way you're going to get thrown off it, by trying to tell us whether we can speak or not. It was a quip, really, that I was going to make. I was going to say, many places, if you touch your brother like you touched yourself, you'd end up in prison. And I think on that note, we'll end the call. Thank you very much, Universal, for your call. Very much appreciate it, but I think we'd gone on as much as we needed to go on that one, Jim.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to go any farther with him just constantly reiterating the same woo. He sounded like, any of the prosperity preachers, The Secret, and all those folks. So,
yeah. Jim, we have another super chat from Ben Nine Lives, who gives us $4.99 and says, "Poor history is not truth of anything."
Very, very true.
Very true indeed.
If you're getting your ancient Middle Eastern history out of the Bible, that would be kind of like getting a history of the Third Reich from a Nazi. Don't do that. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that you would expect them to prop up their own choices and to make themselves look as good as possible. I just realized that could have gone the way I didn't mean it to go. But basically, you need to look at a wide variety of sources, not just a source that is going to assume that the Israelites are the greatest people on earth. Because if you read it, that's what I would expect to read from the Bible.
Yeah,
and they aren't.
No. We have patrons, and we have some fantastic supporters. And every week we like to read out the top 5 patrons. Now, when I say we like to read out the top 5 patrons, Jim, what I mean is the main host likes to present the guest with the list of top 5 patrons and get them to read them out. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. So if you'd like to read out our top 5 patrons.
My favorite screen name ever, Dingleberry Jackson. Oops, all singularity. Devor Valman. Sorry, don't know how to pronounce your last name. Kalevi Helveti, Left in the Leaves, And then an honorable mention to underscore atheism. Actually, he spells it underscore and then an underscore atheism, hence the underscore atheism. But yes, Stiggleberry Jackson, I know that you have been a patron for Talk Heathen for quite some time. I remember back when Talk Heathen got started, hearing your name as one of the top 5 patrons. And thank you so much for continuing to support Talk Heathen with everything. So hopefully you make it out to a back cruise and we can actually meet you in person. That would be kind of cool.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Dingleberry Jackson's been around since the very beginning, I believe, for Talk Heathen. So
yeah, and thank you to all our patrons, and you too can become a patron by going to tiny.cc/Patreon, TH. Jim, who would you like to take next?
We have nothing but atheists on the line. So continuing in the same vein as the previous conversation, just because he's next, is Dan in Canada, who wants, is there any religious texts that have positive moral value? Is that your question?
It is. Hello, Jim. Hello, Richard. Thanks for taking my call. Not an atheist.
Agnostic. My apologies. Well, it says AG. Are you an agnostic? Or did they get the... Okay. My apologies. An agnostic?
Yeah.
And are you a theist agnostic or an atheist agnostic?
I don't... I was raised very fundamentalist, so I have this deep-seated fear that someday God will judge me no matter what happens, so haven't quite escaped that. I kind of hope there's a God out there on a mixed feelings, but I got no proof of a God.
No, that's cool. I was just curious. That's all. Yeah. I wasn't trying to trip you up in any way. I was just very curious. So, do you think that there are religious texts that have positive moral value?
I don't know much about religious texts outside of the Protestant Bible, so primarily what I read. I think there may be morals that can be extracted from religious texts. I believe the same thing can be true of fictional texts. So maybe with some deciphering, there would be something of value there.
And would you consider that is inherent in the text, or it can be extrapolated from a person who already carries certain moral evaluations? For example, let's say that, let's take the Quran, because it's one you're not familiar with. If you see a Muslim who is behaving in what you would consider a good moral way, would you think that they behave in that good moral way because they are inherently a good person, or would you consider that they were behaving in a good moral way because they were following specific instructions from the Quran?
I think a good moral person is a more rounded human being. So the influence of parents, of religious upbringing, of education, all have an effect on what a good moral person is. Do I think somebody specifically who is like myself, but versed in the Quran, is moral because of all the reading of the Quran? Not exclusively. But maybe they read some things that help shape them to see the world.
So I tend to agree with you, Dan. I tend to agree that if somebody is has a certain bent regarding ethics and morality, that no matter what they read, whether it be the Quran or the Tipitaka or the Bible or indeed the Lord of the Rings, they will extrapolate from that book certain guiding principles which kind of help their already innate kind of will to do good things, which will they will read that into the text and extrapolate there. And it's might be even like kind of circular. They might be a good person and they might read stuff and interpret it as being morally good and then take influence from that, which makes them a better person. So I tend to agree with what you're saying if I'm understanding you correctly. Jim, what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, so the individual parts of texts, regardless of whether religious or secular, can have good morals. I think Star Trek does a better job of presenting moral dilemmas and moral choices for the modern world than the Bible does. I think the Bible does a good job of presenting moral dilemmas and moral solutions to those dilemmas for the time period it was in. But that was a time period when slavery was okay, when misogyny was okay, when a lot of things we don't think are okay now were okay. And I think that the Bible is reflective of that. So yes, any text can have good morals. It can be positive morals. But I would say that to find a text that was all positive morals, by today's standards, would probably be found in philosophical moral philosophers studying morality and writing papers than some guy 2,000 years ago reflecting the time period, his time period. I think we have become more moral as a society worldwide. And not equally morally. It's not equal improvements, right? It's kind of random here and there. I think we've got a long way to go because we've got some recidivism happening right now in the United States, at least. But yeah, I just don't see religious texts as being particularly more moral than, say, a philosopher of morality talking today or writing today.
That makes a lot of sense. My question comes from, I guess, an outsider's perspective, and I see a lot of head banging, and I've been listening to the show, and your last callers were just interesting. So, yeah, I'm curious as to if you can see a value to religion being such a large part of your country's psyche.
Jim?
That's such a general question. I think that the answer to that is it depends on what you're looking at. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a way to bring atheists and religious organizations together for a societal benefit? Because a lot of headbutting does nothing but create bruised heads.
Yeah, that actually happens. It doesn't happen in the social media sphere where you see a lot of butting heads. But I know Atheists Helping the Homeless typically work with religious organizations to help the homeless and to get stuff they need. Entertainingly enough, from what I understand, and I just have anecdotal evidence, don't take this as any type of study or anything else, but that the homeless tend to like the atheists helping homeless more than the Christians, because they don't get preached at when they come to get our stuff. They just get our stuff and atheist stuff and go on. Also, the atheists may tend to listen to the homeless a little bit more and bring them stuff that they actually need. So that's kind of just an aside. But yeah, it does happen. It does happen in the charity sphere and helping the less fortunate. And it even helps in some of the, because not every religious person thinks that we should be killing off the LGBTQIA community. And there are theists who are on our side with that, and that is something that atheists and theists tend to help each other out with. Some theists, some Christians do. So it depends. See, that's why I said that your original question was so vague, is because you're trying to lump a whole group of people into the same thing. And I know Christians who are very not conservative, who are very liberal in their beliefs, and they believe in a lot of the same things that I do. And so the only thing that we disagree on is whether or not there's a God. But other than that, they're very supportive of all the things that I'm very supportive of. They're very liberal. So to lump those in with people like, the evangelicals, the Christian nationalist folks, and those types of folks would be doing the good Christians a grave disservice, I think. So I don't think it's as cut and dried as you might like, but it is. But we do have things that Christians and atheists agree on. There are things that atheists and the pagan community agree on when it comes to being a minority belief system. So that stuff does happen. I just don't think it happens in the social media sphere as much as we might like.
Yeah, I tend to agree, especially where I come from. Where I come from, we have the Church of England, which in many respects is so left-leaning that it just turns in circles. It's like a spinning top. But there's even a synod being put together, or has been kind of talked about at least, to allow kind of gay clergy. Which in some of the US kind of right-wing places would be absolutely unthinkable. But I know American Christians.
Gay clergy would be unthinkable.
Yeah. I know American Christians who I'm friends with on social media who were gay. And the fully practicing Christians, they're fully, the faith isn't shaken, and they're great people, and they're all for like they're out, out up for letting everybody else know that they're out, and they're very supportive of those communities. So yeah, I think there's a spectrum of people in all walks of life. I know really, really kind of conservative atheists who don't accept, who are racist, who don't accept gay people, who don't accept trans people. Every kind of box we put people in as a range of people within that box. So I can't think of any kind of category that we could apply to someone in which we wouldn't find an array of people in there who don't all share the same ideas.
You were talking there and had a conversation with a priest friend of mine. And his perspective on gay clergy was a little bit different than I had expected. He said there wasn't the issue with being gay. It was more the same issue that a heterosexual person being a priest would have to face of no sex, period. So as long as you're abstinent and you're not engaging in your sexual preference, it doesn't matter because you're abstinent as a priest. You're supposed to deny yourself those things anyhow. So
yeah, that would be true for a Catholic priest. Yeah, without a doubt. It's denying yourself a perfectly normal, healthy human thing to do.
Yeah, I still think it's a bit odd, and there's not even consensus amongst Catholics the world over. So, gentlemen, that was my questions. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for calling, Dan. We appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Jim, do you want to jump straight into the next call?
I think we've got some super chats. We got 2 super chats.
Oh, yeah, we have. I didn't notice. I'm sorry. Go on, we'll do the super chats first. Then. Do you want to read these, Jim? I've kind of been hogging the super chats. I'll let you take them.
I will do this one. Jimmy Jr. sent $4.99 and says, next week's Talk Heathen is one you will not want to miss. We're Jim and Richard, and we approve this message. Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Jimmy, if you're not familiar with Jimmy, is one of our newest members of the Talk Heathen roster. A fantastic host. So if you haven't caught him yet, do tune in and see Jimmy. Amazing guy. David Fairfield sends $9.99 and says, it seems like non-theists have trouble accepting moral relativism. Why is that a problem?
I think it's because it's easier to have hard and fast rules than it is to think things through, maybe. And I'm not saying they're afraid to think. I just think it's easier for them to do that. And when you start asking them questions like, okay, so telling the truth is always good. So therefore, the people who were hiding, and Frank and her family should have told the Germans that they were there when they were asked if they were hiding any Jews. That should have happened. And they will say, well, no. Well, now all of a sudden we're talking about relativism, right? It doesn't get, you don't have to go too far into moral quandaries to get into moral relativism. So,
Yeah. Great answer, Jim.
Vern Grainer, Lord of Levels, who's only been a member for 2 months. Really, Vern? Vern, come on. Vern's been in the ACA longer than I have by a country mile. And so I want to harass him about 2 months there a little bit. Everyone else should too. If you're in chat, harass Vern about being a member for only 2 months, for as long as he's been around. Thanks for a great show today, guys. You won't even need an after show dinner with all the word salad you got to eat. P.S. More crew cam. Okay, we'll take that advice. There's crew cam.
I don't think it's fair that crew get two goes.
Oh, we're on the entire time. I think it's very fair they get 2 goes.
We love the crew. The crew do everything. We just turn up and talk shit. They're the ones who make the shows happen. We love the crew.
Go watch Shannon Q do live interviews or any of her shows, and you'll see exactly how hard it is to get all this right. So all you and I have to do is sit down and start talking. There is a lot of work that goes on that those guys do that is only seen in the quality of the production. And we've got some really high quality production, so that it's seen every time. So
we have indeed. Let's get to calls, Jim. Who do you want to take?
All right, so let's get back to Oliver from North Carolina, who says that objective morality versus relative morality. That's what it says. What do you want to start the topic off with?
Oliver, are you with us?
Oh. Oliver going once. Oliver going.
Yep, I'm here.
Twice.
Okay. Is it? Hello.
Hey, I'm here. Sorry,
That's
I
good.
had it on mute. I've been on hold for a bit. So I wanted to give you guys my thoughts on morality, and you can let me know what you think.
Okay.
Okay, so I define a moral system as a categorization of actions as bad or good based on how well the actions achieve some sort of goals. And the actions are rated higher on the good scale, the more they support the goals, and higher on the bad scale, the more they oppose the goals. And so those goals could be anything from, reduce human suffering, following a particular God, becoming rich, any sort of goals that you want to put in there. And based on that, I don't think there's any objective moral system. There's a lot of moral systems, and people can choose and create and modify their own chosen personal moral system, whenever they want to. And these moral systems, while they can't be objectively compared to say there is, one truth and this particular moral system is the one that is the best, they can certainly be compared relative to each other, relative to achieving some particular goal. So I'm looking for if there's holes in my logic or what you guys think.
No, I think it's a fair appraisal. I think the only thing I would slightly pick at it, and this is just being picky, is that doesn't really kind of give any indication of what the goal is. and it can be, of course, you could really, if you were like honest about it, choose anything as that goal. You know, the goal could be, you know, every soccer team that wears blue should be supported. If you wanted to go down that route and choose that as the goal, it'd be a silly goal, but it'd be. I better be careful actually, because I stay in Sheffield where we have a team that plays in red and a team that plays in blue. It'd be a silly goal, but yeah, that's. I think as long as you get a shared definition of what that goal is, I don't think there's anything in particular I'd disagree with what you've said.
Yeah. And the goal is subjective. It's so for me, objective, the best definition for objective is something that allows outside of a human mind. And so I agree with you that morality is nothing more than an opinion of someone's actions, a moral actor's actions. So I would my only real difference would be to be more specific. As you know, category is a good start, but I think an opinion of a moral actor's action as being good or bad works a little bit better, but that's just in my own mind. I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. But the choice of that moral goal is entirely subjective, because it has to be, because it's us humans choosing what it is. Just like the rules of chess are entirely subjective. However, and this is kind of where we get into something kind of interesting, is that the actions can then be objective. We can actually objectively determine whether or not an action moves us towards the goal. And this is how computers are able to play chess, right? Because they are determining objectively what get them closer to the goal of winning the game. So I think we can do that. So morality and moral systems are all subjective, but how you evaluate how well a moral actor's action moves you to the goal can be quite objective. And we could measure those quite easily. And so I think if you're going to choose a goal, choose one that can be easily measured, which is why I typically say happiness of the human population is because I know we can measure happiness. And we have many ways to do that, and that Harvard's been doing that for 80 years with their happiness study. And so that's why I choose what I do. But no, I don't disagree with you at all. That is exactly what morals are, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that, Oliver, before you respond to Jim, sorry, just to kind of add on to that, I would add on that we should not confuse that we do have objective facts which we kind of relate morality to, such as the fact that people die and people suffer, and we can kind of base subjective morality around objective facts. But we shouldn't confuse those two things.
Yep, I agree. And to me, the big discussion about morality is choosing those goals and arguing or trying to persuade people why the moral system that the particular one that you believe in is a good one to follow, right? Like you said, like the happiness of humanity, or reducing human suffering. Why are those good goals? So I wish people could reframe when they debate about morals, not so much trying to convince people that a particular one is the truth, instead trying to just show how the one that they've chosen is a good one. Why should people follow that? And I think that would really help all these different moral debates that I've heard about morality, is to kind of put that out in the open. Here's the goals that I'm pursuing, and now here's why I think those should be followed by more people. And then you can try and convince people that your goal system is the one that's the best.
Yeah, that would definitely be better when you can get the other person to agree as to why that is. Yeah, and I try to do that by asking them, okay, why is your God misogynistic? Why does your God support slavery, right? All these other questions that we know their God does. And the only real sin is denying that the God exists or that you should worship him, which is right out of their own Bible. So that tells you everything you need to know about divine command theory. So,
yep, yeah, and a lot of times those arguments devolve. I think devolve into where the believer is trying to convince you that God is, the absolute morality. At least with Christian, God is the absolute morality, and that's that. And then they argue that, but they never argue like the actual tenets of like why would, if you decide to follow this moral system, why would you do it? Like you said, it has slavery and all this other stuff. Why would you do putting aside if God is absolute or not, or if God exists? There is a moral system there, and let's argue that moral system, not whether or not it's from God or any of that sort of thing. Just tell me why you think that moral system is great. But I hardly ever hear that kind of discussion.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool. Okay.
All right.
Okay, well, that's all. I just wanted to run that past you guys.
All right, thanks, Oliver.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
thanks so much.
Thank you, Oliver. I think I just want to address a couple of people in chat before we kind of take the other call we've got.
Okay.
On the line. There's a couple of theists in chat.
Oh, why didn't they call?
Why don't you call? You're literally in the chat section of a call-in show trying to convince people that you're correct. Why don't you just call, talk to the hosts, and then you'll get your message out to far, far more people?
Yeah.
It makes far more sense to call in. I'm very confused about that. And someone, I did notice somebody as well when we're talking about morality. Somebody, I can't remember exactly what they said, but they said something about, does this mean that Buddhists should, something along the lines of, and correct me if I get this wrong, I'm doing this from memory, should Buddhists kind of look after themselves then? And in fact, there is a sutta called the Acrobat in the Tipitaka, which does talk about it's about an acrobat and their assistant, and they're arguing about whether they should look after each other or look after themselves. And the Buddha says, well, actually, you should look after yourself, because in that way you are looking after other people. That is how you look after other people, by taking care of yourself. So that's one. So if you're interested in Buddhism and kind of that perspective on stuff, go and look that sutra up.
Yeah.
That's all I had. Jim?
No, I'm trying to find our theist in there, because I wanted to call him out by name if we could. Because we got one call left, and we'll take your call. If you call in, just do it quickly. And
there are a couple. There's a Muslim guy in there, Sila, I think it is. A Muslim guy who's kind of talking.
Yeah, call in. Defend your God. Defend your beliefs to us, not to the chat. You'll have a better chance at us than the chat anyway, I think. All right, so what may be our last caller, depending on whether or not that caller calls in. Oh, no. Okay, Otari's looks like is going to be the last call. All right. Cole, an atheist, he, him in Minnesota, wants to know how to come out to my religious dad. Yeah. So what is your goal? What are you trying to achieve by coming out as an atheist to your dad?
I guess the main thing is just to be kind of like true to myself, because I've never really believed in a God growing up all the way through high school and college and everything like that. And then my dad's been very religious the last like 5-8-ish years or something. And I just feel very fake when I'm talking to him, because he's very religious, like praying at the table, saying God bless you, or pray for you and everything. And I just go with it to kind of keep him happy.
Yeah.
So I guess I just don't know. Oh, you can go. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you advice. I'm just going to tell you what I do, because I have the same problem. My parents are fairly religious. Now they're Catholics. And I am not out to them. That sounds very strange to say, considering I'm on this show and Atheist Experience, and I'm out on Facebook, but they're not online a whole heck of a lot. So it's entirely possible that they don't know. And what internet consumption that my mom does is religious, and my dad's probably mostly finance and sports. so they don't come across me at all. But I have never felt fake when they decide to pray around them. That is, they're what they want to do, and okay, fine with me. As long, I will bow my head out of respect, and that's about it. If they ask me to say something, then I say something very generic and secular and move on with it. It doesn't bother me at all, because 99.99% of my relationship with my parents has nothing to do with religion, right? Most of what we do has nothing to do with religion. And so it doesn't bother me. I don't feel like I'm being fake. So when someone says that, I don't understand exactly why they would do that, unless some significant portion of your being with your parents or your dad is religion. And to me, that just seems that'd be kind of weird, but I guess it's possible. In that case, yeah, I think I would. But yeah.
Yeah, because I just kind of say about being fake is with my relationship with him recently, it is basically about religion and sprinkles in other things. So I just go with it to be polite, because I obviously don't want to just be rude to him, I guess, if that makes sense. And
right.
Yeah, it's just pretty hard for me to explain, because it feels like I'm just keeping my true self from him, but I'm afraid if I do that, then I'll push him away and he won't want anything to do with me. Because recently we've been getting a little closer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know what you mean by your true self. You're always you.
Right.
And just because you're not out as an atheist. So, and I guess the other question would be, do you think you can do it in such a way that you won't alienate him and have him disown you, or just stop talking to you altogether?
That's my main fear, I guess, is that he would do that. I would do it in the easiest way or politest way I can think of. It's just my fear is he's one of those people where he's very homophobic and other things like that, where he's just kind of a diehard, I guess. So I just worry if he sees me as a non-believer, he would just shut me out.
Yeah. I would keep that and your avoidance of that in mind whenever you do decide to talk to him. And I don't know, just keep in mind the most important things about what you want out of that conversation. And if that is keeping a relationship with your dad, then just keep that in mind, because that's the most important thing, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm just kind of going back and forth on the ignorance is bliss, or being true to him, or I guess, like you said, weighing which one's more important to me, I guess.
Right. Like I said, I don't feel fake, and I am as true to myself around my parents as I am any other time. But my religious activism has nothing, or my atheist activism has nothing to do with my relationship with my parents. Just like my atheist activism has nothing to do with the folks I go scuba diving with. Right.
Yeah, that does make sense. Usually I do separate myself with other people like that. It's just with my dad, since he's so hardcore with it. It's kind of hard to keep that line separate, because I think there's been a few times where he asked if my kid is going to be baptized or things like that, and I just kind of brush it off. I never say a yes or a no, even though I'm not going to.
Okay. Yeah. Those are questions, right? Fortunately, my parents have given up on me having kids, so that doesn't come up very often.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, those are good questions, and I don't have any advice for you, because your situation is going to be unique. I'm not a psychologist or a psychotherapist. I don't know. Richard, you got anything for him?
No, we can't give advice on this, because Jim's in a similar position to you. I'm not. One, because I've always been an atheist, and secondly, because both my parents are dead, so I couldn't come out to them anyway. Parents are very valuable people to have in your life if you have good relationships with them. And I think, everybody has got to weigh that decision for themselves. And I know that might sound like a bit of a cop-out, but you really must weigh that decision for yourself. But I think one important thing to take away from this is don't feel like you're lying to yourself or not presenting your true self by not coming out to your parents or to your dad, because at the end of the day, you are still you, and you can still be proud of who you are, even if you want to kind of avoid conflict. It's a natural thing to do, want to avoid conflict with people, and you shouldn't feel any kind of shame in that whatsoever. The decision at the end of the day must be yours, but do what is right for you first and foremost. Take care of yourself, look after yourself, and if you think telling your dad that you no longer believe is going to inflict on you, and it's going to inflict on the kind of relationship the good relationship that you got, there's no pressure to do it. You don't have to do it. I would also recommend, for a little probably better advice than we can give you, myself and Jim can give you, is calling Recovering from Religion, who are a great resource, and they have great people on who can talk to you on the phone and kind of guide you through this thing in a lot better way than we can, because a lot of them have been there. They have trained advisors who can kind of walk you through some of this stuff step by step. But my only point to you would be, you are not forced to tell your dad, and you are not being kind of dishonest with yourself by not telling him. You don't have to take that burden on yourself, feeling compelled to do it, or you're not being true to yourself, because you are still being true to yourself. You're just trying to maintain a relationship, and that's perfectly valid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the way you two framed it does really help, because my main thing was to just kind of see your opinion, since you have a lot more experience in this, and I just didn't know how to think of it. And like this, I feel like it did really help.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any more experience than you do. I only have one set of parents. So.
Right. I meant like talking about like atheism and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason I'm not out to my parents is because I can't figure out a good way to have that conversation end up with a relationship with my parents. I don't see that happening. So I don't bring it up. But also, I mean, we're not all just one thing as human beings. We can be many things. And we are many things. So, which is why I don't understand the true to yourself stuff when people say that. I don't understand what that means. Like I said, I go scuba diving. I don't talk about atheism. What do I talk about? Scuba diving. What did you see down there? Those kinds of things. And I think that's the same. It's the same type of thing with my parents. We talk about all kinds of things. We just don't talk about religion because we do other things together. So,
Right. But, that makes sense.
All right. Well, Cole, thank you so much for calling. We appreciate it. Good luck with your dad. Whatever you decide to do, best of luck to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Cole. I appreciate that, Cole. And I appreciate calls like that, even though I can't personally put myself in that position, because there are so many people out there who are in that position. And just hearing someone like Cole just talk through his thoughts can be helpful for people.
Yep, I agree. And Cole, I don't know if you're still listening, but if you are, if you had the conversation, give us a call back. Tell us how it went. One, would like to know, and two, it might help other people figure out ways to talk to their parents, or to things to do or things not to do, depending on how it goes. And that's true of almost anybody. If you wanted to call and just say, hey, let me take 5-10 minutes and tell you how this conversation with my parents went, that's an important phone call to take as well. We will still prioritize theists, and don't take that as a slight or as us saying don't call. But yeah, those are important things to talk about as well. How the conversations go with parents, because that's a really common question. So
yeah. Absolutely. And I'm just going to call Seelar out from the chat, the Muslim guy in the chat who has not had the bollocks to give us a call. You sit there talking crap in the chat all night, mate. Just grow a pair and fucking call us and have the conversation.
So he's not a warrior for God then, is what you're saying, because he didn't want to call? Wow.
I think there's a couple of them in there tonight, yeah. It's a call-in show. Call us. We're not going to eat you. The only reason I can see for someone not calling into the show is that they know that they can't defend themselves against the kind of tearing down we're going to do of their shit arguments. So give us a call. Jim, I have absolutely loved working with you. It's been a long time coming.
Yep. We'll have to do it again.
Absolutely. Very much enjoyed it. The prompt for this week is name something God didn't do but took credit for. Reply in the comments below, not in the live chat, and tune in at the beginning of next week's episode to hear the top 3 answers. We are having a Discord after show, so if you are on Discord, get over there and we will see you there. And if you're not on Discord, get yourself on Discord and then get over there and we will see you over there. If you don't believe this is your community, if you're questioning your belief, this is your community. If you do believe, we can be your community. You don't have to be on our side of the fence to be part of this community and have that support there. If you do believe, we don't hate you. We are just not convinced. We'll see you next time.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.